I am Blaine Carter, 68 years old, and never thought my own flesh and blood would betray me this way. After 40 years of nursing other people back to health, I found myself alone in my own home stomach, growling with hunger for days, while my pension account was being drained dry. My son Thomas, whom I had given everything to, left me with nothing, but I had a plan that turned out better than I could have ever imagined. If you are watching this right now, I would love to know where you are viewing from. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned this heartbreaking betrayal into a moment of strength. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I spent 40 years as a registered nurse at Portland General Hospital in Oregon. Every day, I poured my heart and soul into caring for strangers, holding their hands through their darkest moments, celebrating their recoveries, and sometimes comforting them in their final hours. Nursing was never just a job for me. It was my calling. The long shifts, the aching feet, the emotional toll, it was all worth it, knowing I was making a difference. I met my husband Frank during my second year at the hospital. He came in with a broken arm after falling off a ladder while painting his house. There was something about his gentle humor, even while in pain, that caught my attention. We were married within a year, and our son Thomas was born 2 years later. Frank was a construction foreman, hard-working and dependable. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we managed to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood in Portland. We saved diligently for retirement cutting corners where we could. Vacations were camping trips to Mount Hood or the Oregon coast instead of fancy resorts. We drove our cars until they practically fell apart. Every extra penny went into our retirement accounts because we wanted security in our golden years. Thomas was our only child. Perhaps we spoiled him looking back. He was a bright boy, quick to learn, but also quick to want things his way. In elementary school, his teachers often commented that he had potential but struggled with sharing and taking turns. By middle school, he expected top grades without putting in the effort. Frank and I tried to instill a work ethic in him, but sometimes it was easier to give in to his demands than face the tantrums. When Thomas was 16, he wanted a car for his birthday, not just any car, but a brand new sports model his friends were driving. When we offered him our old Honda, instead he didn't speak to us for weeks. Eventually, Frank caved and dipped into our savings to buy Thomas a newer model. I remember Frank saying, "The boy needs to learn that life hands you what you earn, not what you want." But we didn't always follow through on those lessons. Thomas struggled through college, changing majors 3 times before finally graduating with a business degree. He had big dreams, but little patience for starting at the bottom. His first few jobs never lasted more than 6 months, always someone else's fault when he got fired or quit. Then Frank got sick. Cancer. It started in his lungs and spread quickly. For 2 years, I balanced my nursing job with caring for my husband at home. Thomas visited occasionally, always with a new crisis of his own that somehow overshadowed his father's illness. When Frank passed away 5 years ago, Thomas seemed more concerned about his inheritance than grieving his father. The life insurance and our savings left me financially stable. I could finally retire from nursing at 63, my body tired from decades of physical work. I had my pension, Social Security, and our mortgage was paid off. I planned to volunteer at the hospital, join a book club, maybe even travel a little, all the things Frank and I had dreamed of doing together. Then Thomas lost his job again. This time he came to me with a sob story about unfair treatment and office politics. He needed a loan to tide him over. $2,000 became 5, then 10. I dipped into my savings, believing each time it would be the last. He never repaid a cent, always having a new emergency when I brought it up. "Mom, my car broke down. I can't get to job interviews without it. Mom, I'm going to be evicted if I don't pay rent this week. Mom, I need this certification program to get this amazing job opportunity. Each story was convincing, each promise to repay, seemingly sincere. I wanted to believe my son. What mother wouldn't I told myself he was just going through a rough patch, that things would turn around for him soon. My health began to decline around this time. Nothing major at first: arthritis, making my morning routine slower, higher blood pressure, requiring medication, the occasional dizzy spell. My doctor suggested I might want to consider having someone check in on me regularly, especially after I took a fall in the bathroom. I brushed it off, proud of my independence. When Thomas called asking if he could stay with me, just until he found a new apartment, it seemed like perfect timing. He could help around the house, and I would have company. I thought perhaps this was a chance to rebuild our relationship, to recapture some of the closeness we had when he was young. How wrong I was. Thomas moved in with 2 suitcases and vague promises about job prospects. The first week was pleasant enough. He fixed a leaky faucet, mowed the lawn, and even cooked dinner twice. I started to believe this arrangement might work out for both of us. By the second week, the dynamics began to shift. Thomas slept until noon, leaving dishes in the sink and clothes strewn around the guest room. When I gently mentioned it, he snapped, "I thought you wanted me here to help, not to be treated like a child." Small requests for money started again: $20 for gas, $50 for a job interview outfit, $100 for a certification test fee. Each time I handed over cash from my wallet without question. I was still receiving my monthly pension and Social Security deposits, and these small amounts seemed insignificant compared to keeping peace in the house. One evening, Thomas brought home a young woman named Amanda, tall blonde with long acrylic nails and a voice that carried through the house. "Mom, this is my girlfriend," Thomas announced. "She's between apartments, too. Mind if she stays a few days?" Those few days stretched into weeks. Amanda treated my home like a hotel, using my toiletries without asking, cranking up the heat when I was always conscious of the utility bills, inviting friends over when I was trying to rest. The food in my refrigerator disappeared at an alarming rate, replaced with takeout containers and energy drinks. "Blaine, could I borrow your car today? Mine needs a new transmission," Amanda asked one morning, already holding out her hand for my keys. I hesitated, explaining I had a doctor's appointment. "Mom can take the bus," Thomas interjected. "You're being selfish, Mom. Amanda has a job interview." I handed over my keys, then spent 2 hours navigating public transportation with my arthritic knees, only to miss my appointment. When I returned home, my car was nowhere to be seen. It reappeared the next day with an empty gas tank and a new scratch along the passenger door that neither Thomas nor Amanda would acknowledge. My living space began to shrink. First, they took over the living room with their gaming equipment and piles of laundry. Then they complained that my early morning routine disturbed their sleep. Soon I found myself confined mostly to my bedroom, tiptoeing around my own house, a stranger in the home I had shared with Frank for 40 years. My friends noticed the change in me. Margaret from the hospital tried to visit, but Thomas told her I was napping and couldn't be disturbed. When she called later, Thomas answered and said I was too tired to come to the phone. One by one, my social connections dwindled as Thomas inserted himself between me and the outside world. "Mom, you seem confused lately," Thomas remarked, after I couldn't remember where I had put my reading glasses. "Maybe you should let me handle more things around here. Take some pressure off." "I'm just tired, Thomas. I know exactly what I'm doing." "Really? Because you put the milk in the pantry yesterday, and you forgot about your doctor's appointment last week." "That was because Amanda took my car, and I had to." "See? You're getting defensive now. This is exactly what Dr. Reynolds warned us about with early dementia. I had never seen a Dr. Reynolds. When I said so, Thomas sighed dramatically and exchanged a look with Amanda as if to say, "See what I'm dealing with." The gaslighting became a daily occurrence. Keys I knew I had left on the hook would vanish only to be found by Thomas in the refrigerator or under a sofa cushion. Appointments would be mysteriously canceled. Bills, I was certain I had paid, generated late notices. "Mom, this is the third time you've bought orange juice this week," Thomas would say, though I was positive I had only bought it once. "You told us your friend Margaret died last year," Amanda added, "but she just called yesterday. You really had us worried." Margaret was very much alive, and I had never said otherwise. I began to keep a small notebook hidden in my pillowcase, documenting these incidents, desperate to hold on to reality. At my next regular checkup, I managed to go alone by calling a taxi while Thomas was asleep. I confided in Dr. Mitchell about my concerns. "Blaine, I've known you for 15 years, she said, after running several cognitive tests. Your mind is sharp as ever. What you're describing sounds like emotional manipulation, not dementia." Her words validated what I had suspected, but had begun to doubt. The relief was overwhelming, but it was short-lived. When I returned home, Thomas was waiting furious that I had left without telling him. "You can't just wander off, Mom. Do you know how worried I was? I was about to call the police." "I had a doctor's appointment, Thomas. I'm perfectly capable of—" "No, you're not. That's the problem. You're not capable anymore, and you refuse to admit it. Dr. Reynolds said your type of dementia makes you combative when confronted." "There is no Dr. Reynolds," I shouted my patience, finally snapping. "Dr. Mitchell says there's nothing wrong with my mind." Thomas's face changed then, a coldness entering his eyes that I had never seen before. "Mitchell doesn't know what she's talking about. You need real help, Mom, professional help, and if you won't accept it willingly, there are other ways to make sure you get it." That night I heard Thomas and Amanda whispering in the kitchen the words "power of attorney" and conservatorship drifting down the hallway. I clutched my hidden notebook tighter and knew I needed to be very careful. A week after my confrontation with Thomas, he approached me with a cup of tea and an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was sitting at the kitchen table going through my monthly bills, as I always did. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You seem stressed about all these financial details. Why don't you let me help you manage things? I do have a business degree, you know." I looked at the pile of envelopes before me. Electric bill, water bill, property tax statement, bank notices. After decades of handling these matters alongside Frank, and then on my own, they were second nature to me. "I appreciate the offer, Thomas, but I've got it under control." He sighed that same dramatic sigh he had perfected since adolescence. "Mom, you forgot to pay the cable bill last month, and I noticed a late fee on your credit card statement. These things add up." I was certain I had paid both on time, but before I could argue, he continued, "Look, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just offering to take some burden off your shoulders. I could set up automatic payments for everything. You wouldn't have to worry about deadlines or writing checks." Amanda wandered in, phone in hand as usual. "Thomas is great with money, Blaine. He helped my sister save hundreds on her taxes last year. Their united front wore me down. Perhaps it would be helpful to have assistance." After all, Thomas was right, that I had been feeling more tired lately, though I suspected that had more to do with the stress of my living situation than any cognitive decline. "Maybe you could help me organize things," I conceded. "But I still want to see all the statements and approve any payments." Thomas beamed. Of course, I'll just need your online banking information to set everything up. And maybe we should put my name on your checking account just in case of emergency. Warning bells rang in my mind, but I pushed them aside. This was my son, after all. The little boy I had nursed through chicken pox and broken bones. The teenager whose college fund Frank and I had sacrificed vacations to build. Surely I could trust him with my finances when I had already trusted him with so much more. I wrote down my usernames and passwords on a notepad for my bank account retirement fund, even my email. Thomas promised to show me the new system once he had everything set up. That demonstration never came. 2 weeks later, I noticed my bank statement hadn't arrived in the mail. When I mentioned it to Thomas, he said he had switched me to paperless statements to save trees and showed me how to check my balance online. The numbers seemed correct, though I noticed my pension deposit had been immediately transferred to a household expenses account I didn't recognize. That's just to separate your fixed income from your discretionary spending, Thomas explained. Makes budgeting easier. The first unexplained withdrawal came the following month. $4,000 moved from my pension account to an unknown destination. When I confronted Thomas, he seemed surprised I had noticed. Oh, that was for the roof repair, remember? We discussed it last week. We had done no such thing. There was nothing wrong with the roof. Thomas, I don't remember agreeing to spend $4,000 on anything. He exchanged that look with Amanda again, the one that said I was losing my grip. Mom, the roofers were here for 2 days. You even brought them lemonade. This is exactly what I'm worried about with your memory. I knew there had been no roofers, no lemonade, no discussion. But Thomas's certainty made me question myself, despite the notes in my hidden journal saying otherwise. I need that money back, Thomas. My pension has to last. I can't exactly unmake the repairs, Mom, but don't worry, I've calculated everything. You have plenty to last, especially with me managing things now. The withdrawals continued, 2,000 here, 3,000 there, each time, with a different excuse: property taxes, which I knew weren't due for months, medical bills for appointments. I never had home repairs that were never visible. When I demanded to see receipts, Thomas would become agitated. Why don't you trust me? After everything I've done for you, this is my thanks for putting my life on hold to take care of you. The emotional manipulation always worked. I would back down, apologize, even for questioning his motives. But my doubts grew stronger as my account balances grew smaller. I tried calling my bank directly one afternoon when Thomas and Amanda were out. The representative asked security questions I could answer easily, but then requested the verification code sent to my email. When I checked my email, I discovered Thomas had changed the password. I was locked out of my own accounts. That evening, I told Thomas I wanted to go to the bank in person the next day. No need, Mom. What do you need? I can withdraw cash for you. I want to check on my accounts myself. His face hardened. The doctor said you shouldn't be stressing about finances. It's not good for your blood pressure. Which Dr. Thomas? The mysterious Dr. Reynolds, who I've never met. Fine, he snapped. I'll take you tomorrow, but you're being paranoid for no reason. The next morning, Thomas claimed his car wouldn't start. The day after, he had an emergency job interview. Every attempt to visit the bank was thwarted. When I suggested calling a taxi, Thomas said it was a waste of money. When I mentioned asking our neighbor for a ride, he said the neighbor was out of town. My mail began to disappear. Bills, bank statements, even personal letters, all intercepted before I could see them. Once I caught Amanda sorting through the day's delivery, pocketing an envelope from my pension fund before claiming there was nothing but junk mail today. One afternoon, I overheard Thomas on the phone in the backyard, thinking he was out of earshot. No, the job in Seattle fell through. Yeah, but this is working out better anyway. Mom's pension is almost $80,000 total. No, she has no idea. Another month, maybe then we'll have enough for the down payment. The pieces clicked into place. There was no job interview, no career prospects. Thomas and Amanda were systematically draining my accounts to buy themselves a house, leaving me with nothing for my remaining years. That night I lay awake, the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. The son I had raised, the child I had sacrificed for, was stealing my future from me $1 at a time, and I had handed him the keys to do it. We're heading to Seattle for the weekend. Thomas announced on Friday morning, slinging a duffel bag over his shoulder. Amanda has a cousin there who might know about a job opportunity. I looked up from my coffee, surprised by the sudden announcement. When will you be back? Monday afternoon, probably. There's leftover pizza in the fridge. You'll be fine. He dangled my car keys. Taking your car since mine's still acting up. That's okay, right? Before I could answer, they were gone, the sound of my own car engine fading down the street. I sat alone in the suddenly quiet kitchen, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. Something felt wrong about their hasty departure. I opened the refrigerator to find only a single slice of pizza, a nearly empty milk carton, and a few condiment bottles. The freezer contained nothing but ice trays. The pantry, which I usually kept, well stocked with soups, cereals, and canned goods, had been cleared of everything except a half package of stale crackers and some tea bags. My first thought was to order groceries for delivery. I reached for my purse to get my credit card, only to discover it was missing. So was all the cash I normally kept in my wallet. I tried to log into my bank account online to arrange a transfer, but as expected, my password had been changed again. By Saturday morning, I had eaten the last slice of pizza and the stale crackers. I searched the house for any forgotten snacks or emergency cash. Nothing. Even the change jar I kept on my dresser had been emptied. I considered calling a neighbor, but shame kept me from admitting what was happening. How could I explain that my own son had left me without food? Who would believe that a retired nurse with a paid-off house was starving in her own kitchen? By Sunday, the hunger pains had become a constant companion. I drank tap water to fill my stomach and tried to distract myself with television, but the dizziness made it hard to focus. My arthritis medication needed to be taken with food, so I skipped it, adding joint pain to my growing discomfort. In desperation, I tried to pry open the locked cabinets in the garage, where I stored extra household supplies, thinking there might be emergency rations there. That's when I discovered Thomas had changed those locks too. What else was he hiding from me? Monday came and went with no sign of Thomas and Amanda. No call, no text. By Tuesday morning, I was weak from hunger and beginning to fear they had abandoned me entirely. Would anyone even notice if something happened to me? The isolation Thomas had engineered now felt like a prison. With shaking hands, I searched through Frank's old desk looking for anything that might help. In the back of a drawer, I found an unopened bank statement that had escaped Thomas's notice. I tore it open, and what I saw made me sink to the floor in shock. My primary checking account, which should have contained at least $20,000, showed a balance of $312. My pension account, which had held over $70,000 just a few months ago, was down to less than $8,000. Withdrawals, transfers, and ATM transactions I had never made dotted the pages. Thomas hadn't just taken a few thousand for expenses. He had systematically drained almost everything I had. At 68, with no ability to return to nursing, I was facing financial ruin. I curled up on the floor of my bedroom, Frank's old sweater pulled around me for comfort, and allowed myself to weep, not just for the money, but for the complete betrayal by my only child. The person I had brought into this world, nurtured and loved unconditionally, had left me hungry and alone, stealing not just my savings, but my dignity and security. For hours I cycled through grief, rage, and despair. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? What kind of mother raises a son capable of such cruelty? What kind of son does this to his own mother? As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across my bedroom floor, something shifted inside me. The sadness gave way to a quiet, steely resolve. I thought of all the patients I had cared for over my 40-year nursing career, people who had faced devastating diagnoses, traumatic injuries, and crushing losses. I had always admired their resilience, their will to fight back against impossible odds. Now, it was my turn to fight. Thomas may have taken my money, but he had not taken my mind, my spirit, or my determination. I might be hungry, I might be betrayed, but I was not broken. Not yet. I pulled myself up from the floor, steadying myself against the dizziness, and made a promise to myself. This would not be how my story ended. Thomas thought he had won, thought he had left me helpless and defeated. He was wrong. I had survived far worse in my life than hunger and betrayal. With newfound clarity, I began to form a plan. Thomas and Amanda had made a critical mistake in their greed. They had underestimated me. They saw only an aging, vulnerable woman, easily manipulated and controlled. They didn't see the fierce advocate who had fought for patients' rights for decades. They didn't see the widow who had weathered the loss of her beloved husband and built a new life alone. They didn't see the mother who would move heaven and earth to protect what was hers. Their mistake. My advantage. As the evening shadows lengthened across my empty kitchen, I methodically searched every drawer, cabinet, and closet in the house. Thomas may have been thorough in emptying my bank accounts, but I doubted he knew every hiding place in the home I had lived in for 4 decades. In our early years, when money was tight, Frank and I had developed the habit of keeping emergency cash hidden around the house. Never put all your eggs in one basket, Frank used to say. After his death, I had continued the practice out of habit more than necessity. Behind the loose brick in the fireplace, empty. Inside the hollowed-out family Bible, nothing. Under the false bottom of my jewelry box, cleared out. Thomas had been more thorough than I expected. Then I remembered the photo album, the thick, old-fashioned kind with the heavy cardboard pages. On our 25th anniversary, Frank had surprised me by hollowing out the center pages to hide a pair of diamond earrings. After his death, I had placed 5 $100 bills there, then tucked the album among dozens of others on the bookshelf in the spare room. My hands trembled as I pulled it down and opened it to the middle. There, in the hidden cavity, were the 5 crisp $100 bills untouched. A small victory, but it meant survival. It meant options. The next morning I walked slowly to the corner market 3 blocks away. The exercise was difficult with my arthritis and weakened state, but the fresh air cleared my head. I purchased essential groceries, bread, eggs, canned soup, oatmeal fruit, careful to keep the total under $50. I needed to stretch this money as far as possible. Back home, after eating a simple but nourishing meal, I felt my strength and clarity returning. I needed allies, but who Thomas had systematically cut me off from friends and family. Then I remembered Patricia, my former nursing colleague, who had retired to a town 30 miles away. Thomas wouldn't know about her, as we had reconnected through social media after I retired. I didn't have a cell phone. Thomas had convinced me it was an unnecessary expense, but there was a payphone at the gas station down the street. I gathered another $20 from my emergency fund and made the trek. Patricia answered on the third ring. Blaine, is that you? It's been months? Patricia, I need help, I said, my voice breaking. Despite my determination to stay strong, I'm in trouble. To her eternal credit, Patricia asked no questions beyond what she needed to know. 2 hours later, she pulled up in front of my house in her sensible sedan. Over tea at her kitchen table, safely away from my house, I told her everything. The manipulation, the isolation, the financial theft, being left without food. With each revelation, Patricia's expression grew darker. This is elder abuse, Blaine. Plain and simple. It's not just wrong. It's criminal. He's my son, Patricia. My only child. And that makes it worse, not better. Blood doesn't give him the right to steal your life savings and leave you to starve. She was right, of course. The nurse in me recognized the textbook signs of elder abuse we had been trained to look for in patients. The mother in me still struggled to accept that my own son could do this. Patricia made a phone call, and by that afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Eleanor Winters, an elder law attorney who specialized in cases of financial exploitation. Unfortunately, what you're describing is all too common, Eleanor said, after hearing my story. Adult children view their parents' savings as their inheritance and feel entitled to take it early. But the law is very clear on this. What your son is doing is elder abuse and financial fraud. Eleanor explained my options: filing a police report seeking an emergency protective order, freezing any remaining assets, and pursuing civil action to recover what had been taken. But first, we needed evidence. Can you access any of your financial records? Bank statements? Withdrawal slips? Anything showing unauthorized transactions? I shook my head. Thomas intercepts my mail and has changed all my online passwords. Then we'll need to build evidence another way. Do you have your social security number and photo ID? We can request records directly from the financial institutions. Patricia drove me to my bank the next day. With Eleanor's guidance, I explained the situation to the manager. Initially skeptical, he became visibly concerned when I showed him the recent statement I had found and pointed out dozens of transactions I had never authorized. We take financial exploitation very seriously, Mrs. Carter, he assured me. We'll freeze your accounts immediately to prevent further withdrawals and begin a fraud investigation. Eleanor helped me file for an emergency replacement credit card to be sent to Patricia's address. She also connected me with a representative from Adult Protective Services who took detailed notes about my situation. But we needed more than just financial evidence. We needed proof of the emotional manipulation and neglect. Eleanor suggested setting up recording devices in my home to document any abusive behavior when Thomas and Amanda returned. Is that legal? I asked. In Oregon, you can record conversations in your own home without informing the other parties, Eleanor confirmed. And given the circumstances, it's important to gather as much evidence as possible. Patricia's son Tyler, a college student studying computer science, arrived with small recording devices that could be hidden throughout the house, one that looked like a clock radio for the kitchen, another disguised as a power strip for the living room, and a third that resembled a picture frame for my bedroom. They activate by voice and upload to a secure cloud account, Tyler explained, setting up the devices while Thomas and Amanda were still away. You can access the recordings from any computer with the password. As a final measure, I asked my neighbor Marcus, a retired postal worker I had exchanged pleasantries with over the years, but never really known if he would keep an eye on my house and call Patricia if he noticed anything concerning. To my surprise, he was eager to help. "I've seen them come and go at all hours in your car," he admitted. "Always wondered why you never drove it anymore. Something seemed off." With the recording devices in place, a new support network established, and my financial accounts secured against further theft, I returned home to wait for Thomas and Amanda's return. Patricia had stocked my refrigerator and pantry with enough food to last weeks' hidden emergency cash in new locations throughout the house and given me a prepaid cell phone programmed with important numbers. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control returning. The fear and helplessness that had paralyzed me began to give way to something stronger determination. Thomas had taken advantage of my trust and love, but he had underestimated my resilience. Now I just needed to be patient and gather the evidence that would protect me and hopefully recover what had been stolen. The trap was set. All that remained was for Thomas to walk into it. Thomas and Amanda finally returned on Wednesday afternoon, a full 5 days after they had left me without food. They sauntered into the house, carrying shopping bags from expensive stores, laughing about something, until they spotted me sitting calmly at the kitchen table. "Mom, you're up and about, Thomas," said his surprise, poorly disguised. "We got held up in Seattle. Battery died in my phone, or I would have called." "My phone," I corrected quietly. "And it's my car you took without permission." Thomas's expression darkened momentarily before he forced a smile. "Come on, Mom. We've been through this. You agreed I could use your car since mine needs repairs. And the phone is on the family plan I manage. Now remember, I said nothing, merely watched, as Amanda slipped away to the guest room with their shopping bags. I needed to be strategic to gather evidence without revealing what I knew. "Did you eat all the food I left for you?" Thomas asked, opening the refrigerator to find it fully stocked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "A friend brought groceries when I called for help," I said simply. What friend? I thought everyone was out of town. His tone had an edge now. "Marcus from next door." He was concerned when he saw I was alone for so many days. Thomas slammed the refrigerator door. "You shouldn't be bothering the neighbors with your confusion, Mom. We talked about this. There was plenty of food here before we left." "There was one slice of pizza, Thomas. You left me with one slice of pizza for 5 days." The hidden recorder in the clock radio captured his response. "That's ridiculous. Your memory is getting worse. The fridge was full when we left. This is exactly why we need to consider more permanent care options for you." Over the next 2 days, I played the role of the confused, compliant mother while secretly documenting everything. When Thomas claimed he had never received my pension deposit, the recorder in the living room caught him telling Amanda, "She has no idea the direct deposit already came through. We'll be out of here with the whole thing by next week." When I casually mentioned the bank had called about unusual activity on my account, the bedroom recorder captured Thomas's phone conversation. "We need to move faster. She's getting suspicious about the money. How soon can we close on that house in Seattle?" The most damning evidence came when I directly confronted Thomas about the missing $70,000 from my pension account. His mask of concern slipped completely. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled, looming over me. "That money is gone because you've been spending it left and right on ridiculous things you don't remember buying. Besides, I deserve that money after everything I've done for you. Who do you think has been taking care of you all these months?" "Taking care of me," I repeated incredulously. "You left me without food for 5 days. You've stolen my car, my phone, my credit cards, and apparently my life savings." "Prove it," he sneered. "It's your word against mine, and everyone knows you're losing your mind. One call to adult services about your dementia, and I'll have power of attorney by the end of the week." Is that a threat, Thomas? It's reality, Mother. No one is going to believe a confused old woman over her concerned son. Now, where did you hide your emergency cash? I know you must have some squirreled away somewhere. The threat was exactly what we needed. Eleanor had explained that verbal threats constituted elder abuse under Oregon law, especially when combined with financial exploitation and neglect. Marcus witnessed this confrontation through the kitchen window, where he had been coincidentally pruning bushes along our shared property line. He immediately called Patricia as instructed, who contacted Eleanor. The next morning, while Thomas and Amanda were still asleep, I quietly left the house and met Patricia at the corner. She drove me directly to the police station, where Detective Laura Simmons of the Elder Abuse Unit was waiting. Detective Simmons listened carefully to my story, reviewed the bank statements Eleanor had obtained, and then played selections from the recordings we had gathered. Her professional demeanor couldn't entirely mask her disgust at what she heard. "Mrs. Carter, what your son has done is criminal exploitation of a vulnerable adult, financial fraud, theft, and neglect. We have more than enough evidence to make an arrest and file charges." While I gave my official statement, Eleanor was at the courthouse filing for an emergency protective order. By noon, we had both the order and confirmation that the police were on their way to my house with a warrant. I waited at Patricia's home, both dreading and anticipating what would happen next. At 2:00, Detective Simmons called to inform us that Thomas and Amanda had been taken into custody. Officers had found them hurriedly packing with airline tickets to Seattle in their possession and over $20,000 in cash hidden in their luggage. "They're claiming you gave them permission to use your money," Detective Simmons reported. "Thomas is insisting you have dementia and aren't competent to manage your own affairs. He's demanding to speak with your doctor." This was where my foresight in visiting Dr. Mitchell proved invaluable. She had already provided a written statement confirming my cognitive soundness and documenting her concerns about potential elder abuse based on our conversation weeks earlier. Thomas's final attempt to discredit me came at the emergency protective order hearing the following day. He arrived in handcuffs, escorted by officers, while Amanda had been released on bail and sat silently in the back of the courtroom. "My mother needs help," Thomas insisted to the judge. "She's been declining for months. I was only trying to protect her assets from her own confusion." Judge Peterson reviewed the evidence, the bank records showing systematic withdrawals, the recordings of Thomas's threats, the testimony from Marcus about witnessing verbal abuse, Patricia's documentation of finding me weakened from hunger, and Dr. Mitchell's medical assessment of my mental capacity. Mr. Carter, the judge, said sternly, "The evidence clearly shows a pattern of exploitation and abuse, not care. Your mother is demonstrably competent to manage her own affairs, and you have violated both her trust and the law." The protective order was granted, barring Thomas and Amanda from coming within 500 feet of me or my home. The judge also ordered the immediate return of my car, all financial documents, and any remaining cash in their possession. As Thomas was led away, he looked back at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He had never expected me to fight back. He had counted on my love as a mother to blind me to his actions, to make me an easy victim. In that moment, I felt no triumph, only profound sadness for what our relationship had become and for the son I had lost long before this betrayal. The criminal case would take months to resolve, but I had won the first crucial battle. I was safe. I was back in control of my remaining assets, and most importantly, I was free from the manipulation and abuse that had become my daily reality. As Marcus drove me home that evening, I looked at my house, my home with new eyes. The place that had become a prison would be mine again, filled with peace and security instead of fear and deception. It would be a long road to recovery, both financially and emotionally, but for the first time in months, I could see that road clearly ahead of me. The following months brought both challenges and healing. The criminal case against Thomas proceeded slowly through the legal system. He eventually accepted a plea deal, 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and most importantly, a court order to repay everything he had taken from me. Amanda, charged as an accomplice, received a similar sentence. I harbored no illusions about seeing that money anytime soon. Thomas had spent lavishly on electronics designer clothes and a substantial down payment on a Seattle condominium that was now tied up in legal proceedings. The restitution would come in small monthly payments over many years, if at all. Financially, I had to adjust to a new reality. Of my $70,000 pension fund, less than $10,000 remained. My Social Security benefits continued, but they were barely enough to cover property taxes, utilities, and basic living expenses. I had to be frugal in ways I hadn't since those early years with Frank when we were just starting out. Patricia suggested I consider a reverse mortgage to provide additional income, but I resisted. This house held too many precious memories of my life with Frank. It was paid off. It was mine. And after nearly losing everything, I was determined to keep it that way. Instead, I found creative ways to supplement my income. I rented out the guest room to a nursing student from the local community college, a quiet, respectful young woman named Julia, who brought youthful energy into the house and helped with heavier chores in exchange for reduced rent. I also returned to nursing in a limited capacity, working 10 hours a week at a telephone health advice line. My experience was valued, the work was mentally stimulating, and the extra income made a meaningful difference in my budget. Most importantly, it reconnected me with the profession that had defined much of my life and identity. The emotional healing was more complicated than the financial recovery. I joined a support group for survivors of elder abuse, facilitated by a compassionate therapist named Dr. Howard. Initially, I felt embarrassed to share my story. How could a retired nurse with decades of healthcare experience have been so blind to the manipulation happening in her own home? Abuse thrives in isolation, Dr. Howard explained during one session, and the closer the relationship, the harder it is to see the signs. Being victimized doesn't make you weak or foolish, it makes you human. In the group, I met other seniors who had experienced similar betrayals by family members they trusted. Margaret, whose daughter had forged her signature on mortgage documents. Harold, whose nephew had convinced him to invest in non-existent business ventures. Sophia, whose grandson had stolen her identity to open credit cards. Their stories helped me recognize that what happened wasn't my fault. Thomas's actions reflected his choices, not my failings as a mother. This realization didn't erase the pain, but it helped me carry it more gently. My relationship with Thomas remained complex and unresolved. For the first 6 months, I refused his calls and returned his letters unopened. The betrayal was too raw, the trust too thoroughly shattered. But as time passed, I began to wonder if there was any path forward, not to the relationship we once had, but to something new that acknowledged the painful reality while allowing for possible redemption. After much reflection and consultation with Dr. Howard, I agreed to meet Thomas in a supervised setting at the counseling center. The man who sat across from me seemed smaller, somehow diminished by the consequences of his actions. He offered apologies that sounded rehearsed explanations that rang hollow. "I just wanted a better life," he said. "You and Dad always had everything so together. I never felt I could measure up. Taking my life savings, And leaving me to starve was not the answer to your insecurities, Thomas, I replied evenly. Our relationship remained tenuous, defined by strict boundaries and limited contact. Perhaps someday genuine remorse and changed behavior might open the door to forgiveness, but I no longer felt obligated to sacrifice my well-being for the sake of maintaining family ties. Blood relation wasn't an entitlement to endless chances. The experience transformed my connection to my community. I had always been independent, perhaps to a fault. Now, I recognized the value of interdependence. Marcus and his wife became dear friends, joining me for weekly card games. Patricia and I resumed our tradition of monthly lunch dates. I joined a book club at the library and a walking group at the community center. Most significantly, I began volunteering with a local elder justice organization, speaking to senior groups about recognizing the warning signs of exploitation. My nursing background, combined with my personal experience, made my presentations particularly impactful. Financial abuse of seniors is an epidemic, I would tell my audiences, and it isn't always strangers running scams. Often it's the people closest to us who take advantage of our trust. Love shouldn't mean allowing yourself to be victimized. I shared practical advice: keeping emergency funds in secure locations, maintaining separate bank accounts, even from trusted family members, creating a network of friends who check on each other regularly, knowing the resources available through adult protective services. But I also emphasized the emotional aspects, the importance of setting boundaries, the courage to speak up when something feels wrong, the knowledge that vulnerability is not the same as weakness. 1 year after Thomas and Amanda were ordered out of my home, I celebrated by hosting a small dinner party. Patricia Marcus and his wife Julia, my tenant doctor, Howard, Eleanor, and even Detective Simmons gathered around my dining room table. Looking at their faces, this unlikely family I had assembled, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I want to thank all of you, I said, raising my glass. A year ago, I thought I had lost everything: my savings, my independence, even my sense of self. What I didn't realize was that I was about to gain something precious: the knowledge that I am stronger than I knew, and that true family can be found in unexpected places. The journey had not been easy. There were still days when grief ambushed me. Grief for the son I thought I had, for the retirement security that had been stolen, for the innocence lost. But those days grew fewer as I built a new life on my own terms. If there was wisdom to be gained from this painful chapter, it was: this trust is valuable, but discernment is essential. Love does not require blind acceptance of mistreatment. Age may bring certain physical limitations, but it need not diminish our right to dignity and autonomy. And sometimes the greatest act of self-care is setting a boundary that others may not like, but that you desperately need. My story is not unique. In senior centers, nursing homes, and neighborhoods across America, older adults face exploitation by those they should be able to trust most. Some fight back as I did. Others suffer in silence. My hope in sharing my experience is that it might give courage to someone else facing similar circumstances to recognize the warning signs earlier than I did, to reach out for help before the situation becomes desperate, to know that age should confer respect, not vulnerability to abuse. I am Blaine Carter, 69 years old now, and I am reclaiming my life one day at a time. My son betrayed me, but that betrayal does not define me. What defines me is the strength I found to stand up for myself when it mattered most, and the wisdom to build a life filled with genuine care and respect. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and recovery. And if you know someone who might be experiencing elder abuse, please share this video. It might be the lifeline they need. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.